March 6, 2007. What would you do if the night around you suddenly started whispering with gunfire? The ground shook under artillery thunder, and somewhere in the darkness, a wounded soldier was screaming your name while shadows moved through the dust like ghosts of war. Could you run toward that sound, knowing the next step might be your last? That was the terrifying reality on the first day of Operation Achilles, the largest NATO ground offensive in Afghanistan since 2001, launched deep in the harsh deserts and irrigation canals of Helmand Province, where coalition forces from NATO, including the British Army, U.S. Marines, Dutch troops, and Afghan soldiers, pushed into Taliban-controlled territory to break insurgent strongholds around the Kajaki Dam and restore control over the region. But what looked like a strategic military push on paper quickly turned into something far darker and more personal for the soldiers on the ground. Before sunrise that morning, helicopters cut across the black Afghan sky, their rotors thumping like giant war drums, while troops packed inside stared into the darkness below. Knowing intelligence reports warned of hidden trenches, booby traps, and fighters who knew the land better than any map ever printed. And when the first boots hit the dust, the silence felt wrong, almost unnatural. The kind of quiet that old combat veterans say means the battlefield is holding its breath. Then suddenly, the valley exploded with gunfire as Taliban fighters opened up from mud compounds and irrigation ditches. Tracer rounds slicing through the early morning air like burning needles, while machine guns rattled across the fields. And within minutes, the offensive turned into a chaotic fight for survival, where soldiers crawled through poppy fields and dry canals, trying to locate an enemy that seemed to vanish into the terrain like shadows. One British platoon advancing toward a cluster of compounds suddenly triggered an ambush, so intense that radio traffic turned into panicked shouting as RPGs slammed into nearby walls. And that is where one of the most unforgettable moments of the operation unfolded, when a combat medic sprinted across open ground under heavy fire, after hearing a wounded Marine crying out. A moment soldiers later described as both heroic and horrifying, because the medic ran through a storm of bullets with nothing but a medical pack and sheer determination, sliding into the dirt beside the injured man while rounds snapped overhead. And as he tried to stop the bleeding, the battlefield around them turned into a nightmare scene straight out of the darkest war stories. Dust clouds rising from explosions, the smell of burned metal and cordite filling the air. And somewhere nearby, a Taliban fighter shouting through the smoke before another burst of gunfire cut him off. Veterans later recalled that during those hours, the battlefield felt almost haunted, with figures appearing and disappearing in the haze, sometimes friend, sometimes enemy, sometimes just shapes moving in the smoke that made exhausted soldiers jerk their rifles up in fear. And one Marine later admitted he swore he heard footsteps behind him in a deserted compound, only to spin around and find nothing there, except broken doors swinging in the wind. A moment that chilled him more than the gunfire, because war has a way of playing tricks on the mind when fear and adrenaline mix together. Despite the chaos, coalition forces pushed forward day after day, clearing villages, securing canals, and hunting insurgents who refused to give up ground easily. And the mission itself carried enormous strategic importance, because Kajaki Dam was critical to power and water in the region, meaning whoever controlled that infrastructure held influence over thousands of Afghan civilians. So Operation Achilles was not just about defeating fighters, but about reshaping the future of the province. Still, the cost was heavy, with constant firefights, roadside bombs, and sniper attacks turning even routine patrols into deadly gambles. And soldiers learned quickly that Helmand's beauty hid danger everywhere. Fields that looked peaceful during the day could become killing zones at night, and compounds that seemed abandoned sometimes concealed fighters waiting silently behind thick mud walls. One chilling account from the operation described a nighttime patrol moving through a village, where every window was dark and every door closed. The silence so thick the soldiers could hear their own breathing through their helmets. Until suddenly, a single shot cracked through the air and chaos erupted again. Muzzle flashes lighting the alleys like brief lightning storms while troops scrambled for cover. And when the fight finally ended, the patrol leader admitted the silence afterward felt worse than the battle itself, because it left everyone wondering who had been watching them from the darkness. Through relentless pressure, coalition forces gradually forced Taliban fighters out of key areas, destroying weapons caches and breaking defensive networks that had taken months to build. But the emotional weight of the mission stayed with the soldiers long after the shooting stopped, especially the medics who saw the human cost of every firefight, patching wounds in dusty fields while helicopters roared overhead, carrying the injured away. And many of those medics later said the scariest part was not the bullets, but the moment of silence before they ran into danger. That split second when the brain whispers you could turn back, but the heart says someone out there needs you. Operation Achilles eventually succeeded in weakening insurgent control in the region and securing critical infrastructure. But its legacy is remembered less for strategy and more for the raw human moments that unfolded in the dust and smoke of Helmand. Moments of courage where soldiers ran toward danger to save their brothers. Moments of fear where the battlefield felt almost supernatural. And moments of grim humor where exhausted troops joked about surviving another day, because sometimes laughter is the only shield against the darkness of war. Historians today still study the operation as a major NATO offensive, but the men who were there remember something far more personal: the sound of helicopters at dawn, the terrifying silence before the first shot, the medics sprinting through gunfire, and the eerie feeling that in war, the line between bravery and fear is razor thin. And now I want to ask you something honestly, because history is not just about dates and strategies, but about human choices in impossible situations. If you had been there on that dusty morning of March 6, 2007, hearing a wounded soldier calling for help while bullets tore through the air around you, would you have had the courage to run into that storm like those medics and soldiers did? Or would fear have frozen you in place? Tell me what you think and share your thoughts below, because every perspective adds another voice to the story of this battlefield.